Mappable USA podcast, where we put you on the map. This is Ron Costa, broadcasting live in the Mappable USA studios in Las Vegas. And as usual, listen, anytime you go online, you go to the newspapers, you see all these stories about opportunity zones. It's a really, really hot topic as usual. So we will bring in Vicki Hutchmala from the QOZ Marketplace. Vicki, how are you today?
Well, I got to tell you, Ron, I am so outstanding, I can't even stand myself.
Oh man, you see, you're coming off your all-star performance in our last podcast, right?
Evidently, I'm still flying in the sky.
Everyone's talking about that. That was a good podcast, and today we're going to try to match that as well. We got a great guest, a friend of the show. She's been on before, and we're going to talk about opportunity zones with Erin Gillespie from Madison Street Strategies. Erin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Hot here in sunny Florida, but thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on again. We really enjoyed the last time you were on there. Gave us a lot of good information, and then Erin, you're everywhere too, because I notice you do a lot of podcasts. You get out there. You're on a lot of news. You post frequently on social media. So I mean, to have somebody on the show of your caliber and your knowledge and your experience is great for us, great for our listeners.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yep. So let's get started with the topic today. People are talking about opportunity zones a lot, and you hear both the positives and the negatives about it. But these people who are talking about this may not be in the trenches like you might be. So why don't you just talk about us a little about what you're seeing in the marketplace? Are you seeing deals move forward? Are you seeing stagnation? Are you seeing interest, genuine interest, or what do you think your experience has been so far with opportunity zones?
So I think we're seeing all across the board of what you just said. We're certainly seeing deals being done. I think you see that all across the country. We know a lot of folks on the accounting and tax attorney side that are busy starting up funds, busy closing deals. So I definitely think you're seeing it. They may not all be making the news, and I think that's sort of the difference, is that just because someone's starting a fund or investing in a property doesn't mean they're announcing it to people, right? So I definitely think that there's deals being done, but there's certainly still some hesitation. I think people who are very familiar with development, maybe even with 1031s, are looking at this and trying to see what's different, what's better, what's the time frames look like, and because there are certainly some deadlines, and in fact there's one this week coming up for people who had certain gains last year. So you sort of see a rush this week, and then I think people who have a little bit more time, because this is a sort of a flexible program, are waiting to see what the market looks like before they make all their decisions. So there's certainly some hesitation in some sectors, but it's moving fast and furious in other places.
I've been hearing on various news broadcasts and that how everyone's talking about, well, we need to have more development and we need to do more for the inner cities and more, and we have to do more. But it appears to me that people just don't know about opportunity zones and don't know that the opportunity is there if only the public as well as the financial industry could just be educated to understand it's there, you can participate, you can make a difference, you just have to know about it, and that seems to be the struggle, getting people to know it's there already.
I think there still is a huge education gap. I think that's one of the reasons why you see so much attendance at these opportunity zone expos and workshops and conferences all across the country. I see some on LinkedIn and Twitter today that are happening in D.C. And so, I mean, you still have people who are seeking out information, and it goes everywhere from folks like regular developers who are just interested in figuring it out, people who own property in these areas want to know what does that mean for them, all the way up into, again, those professionals who are looking at the nitty-gritty of the regulations and trying to parse very specific tax details out for their clients. So there's still a learning curve, and I think the regulations aren't completely finished. They're not finalized for sure. Whether there'll be another round, I think, is up in the air. But if you look at some of the other tax incentive programs, at the end of the day, it's years before every regulation is complete and people try things and see if they work. Everything is not written out in stone, and so there's still going to be learning for those professionals trying to make deals happen. And some of it, frankly, will probably end up going to the IRS and Treasury to decide if they can do it this way or that way, and to parse some of these things out, because everything is really not written in stone at this point.
You think the legislation will continue or be a new set of legislation will be able to continue the opportunity zones past what the time deadlines are now?
You know, I wouldn't take a bet on what Congress would do right now about anything. So,
well, there is that.
That's a tough question. You know, I think given the fact that it was bipartisan legislation is a very good thing. There aren't that many things out there that are truly bipartisan nowadays. I think if we see success, then certainly that gives a greater weight to extending the program beyond the current deadlines. I do think the regulations have extended it quite a bit from what people thought the rush would be to originally people thought you had to, get your money in this year. And so I think the extension of some of those deadlines has helped, especially with the 10-year hold. But, for us, what we sort of preach is that community-driven strategy approach, and that if you can get communities at the table with investors and developers and local folks who are putting these economic development projects in the ground, you will really, truly see success at the community level. And the more success we see, the more media articles that cover that issue, I think the more, pressure is put on our congressional delegations to make sure this program continues like other incentive programs. But when you have negative articles about gentrification and how, wealthy people are using this to get a benefit that maybe that wasn't what it was intended for, it makes the program look bad. And I think there's room for across-the-board investment. You want people who are already invested in these communities to take advantage of the incentive and invest more.
Right.
But those people who throw around words like tax break for the wealthy, which it really isn't, but you can spend things how you want, it makes the program look bad. So we need to show some success stories. And I think you see those in communities across the country. If you look at my favorite story recently is what Birmingham, Alabama is doing. And I'm originally from Alabama. We don't always have a lot of reasons to tout the state, but Birmingham actually has an amazing public-private partnership for opportunity zones that really could be a model for any community across the country. So what you're seeing is those communities that step up and take this on, their residents will be happier, the developers and investors will be happier, the community will see it as a success, and that's really the way to go.
Well, I think that's actually the key to the whole project. The whole concept is to get people involved, bring them to the table, and work together. But if communities at the state level or local level don't participate and add to the incentives offered by the feds, then nobody's going to participate. Nobody's going to see a benefit or make it any different. Are you noticing that more communities, state and local-wide, are participating, are getting actually involved in understanding and bringing people in through incentives?
It's certainly not across the board. I mean, I think I could name most of the communities off the top of my head that are doing a really good job at this. But I think, again, those will be models for other communities to follow. And when you say incentive, we talk a lot about that when we go around and talk to communities and states about how to do this. People think incentives are money, and that's not necessarily the case. There may be other, many states are aligning their tax programs with the federal tax program. In Florida, we don't have personal income tax, so we don't have to worry about that. But many states are trying to align that tax code, which is important. But incentives in a lot of these cases can be at the community level. We can look at permitting. We can look at zoning. We can look at fast-tracking some of these projects. If you believe it's going to help your community, why wouldn't you have a fast-track process for opportunity zone projects? And some of those timing issues, like permitting and zoning, can be way more of an incentive to developers, because in this program, time and money are the same thing. You have to hit these time deadlines. You have to hit these time deadlines, and if a community can put forth a zoning or permitting issue that solves your problem, that can be a huge incentive to a developer to pick you over, perhaps a neighboring community or a different state where the project may not be quite shovel ready.
Well, that's right, and in Nevada, we are seeing that in where our opportunity zones are located. We're seeing where the local, the civil, the city and the county are actually offering those type of incentives to streamline the process to get the project working right away because of the time constraints. And if you have to wait 2 years before your permit and your planning and your zoning process is complete, you don't have the opportunity to participate in the Opportunity Zone program.
Exactly.
Let me ask you something Are you seeing any activity or more or less activity in rural opportunity zones, whether in Florida or otherwise?
I think rural is still a challenge. We definitely see people stepping up and trying to learn about it, trying to figure out. We met people in Las Vegas who had come in from other parts of Nevada. We've met people here in Florida that are looking at some very rural communities and trying to say, how do I take advantage of this? But it's a challenge, right? Those communities already had challenges taking or getting economic development to grow in their area, and this is not a magic bullet, right? It's just another tool in their toolbox. So I definitely see rural communities trying, a few of them, really looking at this and trying to say, how does this work for me? But I think it's another tool in the toolbox. Again, if they were up against another community that didn't have an opportunity zone, or they're able to get a project in the ground faster, that could make all the difference in the world. But I do think rural communities have a little bit of a harder time just in general with economic development, and this would be very similar to that, I would say. But they're definitely paying attention. In Florida, as we talked about last time, we made a commitment that every county in our state would have an opportunity zone, so that we made sure that our rural communities have a seat at the table. And some other states did that as well. Some states didn't, but I think there's a good amount of rural communities that have opportunity zones, and they're doing just what every other community is doing, trying to figure out, how does this work for me, and how do I incentivize investors to come here instead of somewhere else?
When you were in Vegas at the OZ Expo in May, did you meet Sheldon Mudd?
Yes,
Sheldon is from northern Nevada, and he's working with the rural opportunity zones, because in his area, that's basically mostly all of the opportunity zones are rural. And he's working to develop the communities and doing a fish farming enterprise. And so there's, you think of rural and you don't know what to think of, but if you become creative, rural, you can turn that into just about anything that will work, even a fish farm in Nevada where there's no water. So, you have to be a little bit creative.
Yeah, we did. Actually, he was the example I was thinking of when I said rural folks in Nevada. We met with him and talked with him, and he was great and really trying to think outside the box about, how he could drive investment into his area. So he's a really good example of someone taking this on and saying, we're in a rural community, but we want to make opportunity zones work for us.
That's right. Build your community.
Yeah, and Erin, you talked about before getting the community involved and getting them on board with the program and all the incentives, et cetera. What do you say to some of these people who may live in opportunity zones, who maybe have been fed a line previously that this is going to be better for you, et cetera? They may be skeptical on the whole program to begin with, and that's part of the community too, because these guys have to be on board as well. So how do you get the message to them that this is a program that's for real and could possibly work to benefit the whole community?
I mean, it's a balance, right? We hear that a lot. I mean, it's certainly not a hypothetical. We have directly heard from communities right here in Florida and in other states that the residents of the community are very concerned. Growth and change scares them because they don't always benefit. And so I think that goes to the heart of our community-driven approach, that the way this program is set up, there is no state or local role, and an investor can basically come in, and as long as it meets the basic zoning requirements of whatever the property is, they could do whatever they want to without talking to the residents who live there, without talking to the city or county or getting approval. This is not a grant program. No one's putting in an application. And so that goes to the heart of why it's so critical for communities to build, some sort of stakeholder engagement for this process, because the investment is going to happen. Either you're not going to get it if you want it, and if you aren't sure if you want it, you'll get it and with no guidance from the local community. And that's why I love the Birmingham example so much, because we've seen communities like Erie, Pennsylvania, that took this by the horns and said, we're going to make a difference in our community. And we've seen them really get out ahead and have people looking at them just by nature of going for it. The Birmingham example is even more interesting because they actually built an investment board with local business CEOs from some of the major corporations in Birmingham, Alabama, and they also built a community board with local leaders, including pastors and other people who live in the communities. And those two boards are working together to figure out projects and how to make a difference in Birmingham. And that kind of community input will make all the difference in the world to whether the local residents feel comfortable with it or not. I haven't seen many other or any other really communities that have that level of support and engagement, but I think it will be a model for other communities, especially those mid-sized to larger cities, to follow, to say that we don't want to leave our residents behind. We want them to also have a seat at the table. But part of it is, meeting in the middle. When you have areas that are blighted and need help, economic development can bring some of that help. Does that displace certain individuals? It certainly can. How do we mitigate those impacts? How do we bring economic development in to improve our communities and mitigate the negative impacts? And I think that's a balance that communities have to work together to solve. But this program, again, is a tool they can use to do that.
Yeah, and as you said, once it starts working, then it becomes copied, and then all of a sudden, maybe some of these negative articles will turn into positive ones when they point to something that says, "Okay, this is working. Let's do it just like these guys did. Let's follow their steps. Let's follow their outline, and we could get the same results in our community as well."
Exactly.
Yeah. Vicki, you got a question?
Well, I was just going to say, who is it that Madison Street Strategies works with? Are you more focused on the local communities or the governmental entities in the communities to help them understand how to create the projects for people to invest with? Do you go out to the equity people who have the money and want to invest and create the funds, or are you just around the board?
Our main audience is the community. So we work with local government along with sort of what I would consider public-private partners like economic development councils and chambers of commerce. But really, our community focus is the audience we're going with. Now, we get a lot of calls from private sector folks, and we try to connect people with the right resources. We do a lot of education of pretty much anybody across the board. But the folks we actually work with are communities and local community groups that are trying to figure out a way to make this program work for them, connect them to funds, look at how to make sure that their projects, if they have properties or projects that need investment, how do we connect them to the right people to make that successful? We're mostly focused on the community level.
Well, are you finding that there's more projects that are business-oriented or residential-oriented, or is kind of a balance?
That's a good question. I mean, we're definitely seeing more projects and property as opposed to business investment, which is sort of still an underutilized part of opportunity zones. But as far as on the property itself, it's probably a good mix. I mean, you see multi-use, you see affordable housing is a big deal, workforce housing. And so I would say it's probably a good mix of business and housing. Of course, the housing is not like single-family residential. It'll be apartments or, multifamily housing. But there's been a good mix of that. Now, the underutilized part for sure is the business investment itself, the other piece of opportunity zones where you can actually invest capital into a business. I think that there may be some cases of that, a handful of cases where that is happening across the country, but it's few and far between as people really try to figure out the guidance on that and how it would work. And I think we'll see that start to grow, again, as you see success stories of companies that have been able to use this kind of investment to grow their business.
Well, and, you're right, too, because with opportunity zones, one of the disadvantages of the program is there's no history. And with no history, nobody wants to be the first one to take the risk to go out and do something. They want to sit back and wait and see, well, let's see who does what and where it works and how it works. And in the meantime, time is passing and the program is marching towards the end, and nobody wants to take that risk, and nobody wants to go out there and be the first one to lead the project and say, look, this works, come and do it. And I think that's one of the setbacks to the program.
I mean, I think that you're definitely seeing hesitancy from people who are waiting, but I think there's also a lot of people who are jumping in headfirst and saying, this is a project that I was interested in, this is a project that I was already involved in, and this incentive will help me continue to invest or invest more. And take advantage of it. So I think you see on both sides of the spectrum right now. Smaller developers are probably going to be more cautious because they have more to risk. I think people, you're looking at perhaps larger firms who have projects all over the country that maybe can afford a little bit more risk to try to take advantage of the incentive. And then you can look at venture capital firms that maybe they take risky investments all day long. They may be happy to jump into some of these businesses and make investments, hoping that one of them down the road turns into an Uber or a Google or something like that. So I think you'll see, there's places for all sorts of risks, like a mutual fund or the stock market. You can invest risky, you can invest less risky. I think they're all across the board in opportunity zones. You just have to figure out what your level of risk is that you're comfortable with and find something that meets that.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings from President Reagan a while back was, you have to be worried when someone says to you, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. And you have to be skeptical of that. So this is obviously a government program. President Trump is all behind it. What do you say to investors who may look at this and say, this is too good to be true. Something's wrong. I mean, I can defer all my taxes, my capital gains. Something's up here. Where's the catch? And I'm wondering if the skepticism on the part of investors may be holding them back because they may think this is is this a scam? Is this something that this is too good? So I'm wondering if that's a part of these investors kind of like being afraid to pull a trigger on some of these deals.
That's a good question. I think for investors who are used to working in the world of EB-5 or 1031s or some of these other complicated government programs, they recognize that there's a trade-off for how the investment, how you get the incentive and how the investment works. I would say the biggest holdup that I think investors have with this is the 10-year hold. To get the maximum benefit, you have to have the longest hold. And 10 years is a long time for investors to hold their capital gains in any kind of asset, and without the potential to pull it out at any moment. And so that would be what I see as the biggest setback, but that's the reason the policy was developed, is to encourage long-term investment in these communities that have not seen investment in decades. And so that's really what an investor has to balance. Can I put my money here long enough to take advantage of this really great incentive, which in some cases does sound too good to be true? The other issue is just risk itself. If you invest in a property and there's a downturn, if the country has another recession and the property doesn't go up in value, well, the incentive doesn't make any sense if you're losing money, right? It's only an incentive if you're making money.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. That is a huge topic that we've discussed many times on this, because the self-certification nature of this, and everybody kind of wants to get into the funds aspect of it, and you don't know who is developing these funds or if the developers can follow through on their deals, and investors have to be worried about that. There's a big due diligence process that has to go through this, and we've talked about this many, many times, so I'm glad you hit on that point, because it's a really, really big one.
Well, exactly, because even though it sounds like an easy thing to do, self-certify yourself, create the fund, and now you're good to go, there's a lot of details and a lot of criteria that has to be followed. And if you're not working with professional experts in terms of attorneys and CPAs and financial planners and the like, then you'll go through the process and you'll end up holding an empty bag because you didn't follow the details that needed to be done in the first place. It's not a do-it-yourself project.
That's true. I mean, the self-certification makes it sound easy. And to set up the fund, you have an LLC, you do a self-certification, that may be simple. But to follow all of the other regulations, which I think we're up to about 200 pages so far, you want to have good tax guidance. So we encourage people who want to start a fund, unless they happen to also be a CPA, or an attorney, to have a good tax attorney, have a good CPA, make sure you do it right. Because if you make one mistake and you don't take the incentive down the road, not only would you lose out on the incentive, but like you said, there are penalties, and that could really add up.
And it's not just the capital gains tax that you're getting the benefit from. You've got to be aware of the taxes, be they state taxes or local taxes, that are involved in the project where you're investing. So if you live in Florida and you want to invest in a project in Nevada, you have to understand if there's tax consequences aside from federal taxes. And if you don't know that, that's a big issue for you.
Absolutely. That's why good professional help of people smarter than me is what we recommend on that side. You really want to have the right tax guidance. Absolutely.
And nobody can know everything. I mean, regardless of what you do or what part you play in the industry, nobody knows everything about the whole project. And you need to have a team of people that can make it work. Without that, your chances are less and less.
Right. Absolutely.
They say, Erin, that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. That's what I heard, right?
I agree with that. I'll honestly say that's probably been one of the most fun things about getting into this world of opportunity zones and starting our own business is that we learn something every single day. Not a day goes by that we don't feel, and that makes it that much more fun to me.
Yeah, because it's a new thing and it's something that you can create, which is why the true entrepreneurs and people who are the risk takers in the world, this is like the perfect thing for you to get involved in because you can create the industry. You can be the leader that brings everybody along with you. And for an entrepreneur or somebody with that type of personality, that's the best thing there is in life, is being able to create the path.
Right, absolutely. Yep. I mean, it's been fun because we were, we got in on the ground floor with opportunity zones working for the state and working to select the zones. So we were ahead of the game as far as that part goes. And again, we worked mostly with communities, so it made the most sense for us to continue trying to do that work here in the private sector.
Exactly. So I think to recap this show, opportunity zones have their challenges. There's negative and positive things about it so far, but if it's done correctly, there's a lot of people doing it. It should be moving forward in the right direction. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think it's definitely moving in the right direction, and I think you'll start to see many more success stories come out about how opportunity zones really made a difference in local communities that were struggling, and that's what we're excited to see.
And I would also add one thing to that, Ron, that one of the major key proponents to the success of this is getting your community involved and working together so that you have a kind of symbiotic relationship so that the community can support the project can support the community, and together they support the people who live there. And that's the whole concept of opportunity zones. And that's why what Madison Street is doing is essential, because you're leading the way and showing people how important it is for communities to be a part of this and be a major player.
Yeah, and if anybody out there is listening to the podcast right now and wants more information on your services, Erin, over at Madison Street Strategies, how do they get a hold of you? What's the best way?
Sure. Our website has all of our contact information. It's www.madison-street.com.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. We'll link it to the website like we did in the last show that you were on. And, I really appreciate your time today as well. Another great interview. And folks out there, Erin's being a little humble because she really is one of the big voices out there in the industry and knows what she's doing. And I'm impressed by all the stuff that you're putting out there, content-wise, online, social media, at your website, in the appearances that you do. You do a great job with all this, and the industry is lucky to have you.
Oh, well, thanks so much.
And I second that, Erin. You do a fabulous job.
Oh, thank you. It was wonderful to meet you guys in person. I hate we won't see you at the next round, but hopefully I hear we're going to have one in Miami in October, so we'll definitely be at that one.
Oh,
yeah. Well, let me tell you, 100 degrees in Vegas is a lot better than 100 degrees in Florida. So you're welcome back here whenever you want.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Okay, Vicki, any closing words for this?
I think it was outstanding. Thank you so much, Erin. We always enjoy talking to you.
Oh, thank you guys so much.
Great. Everyone out there, you're listening to the Mappable USA podcast, where we put you on the map. We're at mappableusa.com. Go to the website, scroll down, pick your syndication source that you like best, and follow us so you never miss an episode. And if you want to be a guest on the show like Erin was today, there's a guest tab there. You can click on that, fill out the form. We'll see what we can do about getting you on the show. So once again, thank you for subscribing. Thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time on another Mappable USA podcast. Have a great week, folks.